بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله وحده والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعده. أما بعد فقد قال عز وجل بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألم تر كيف فعل ربك بأصحاب الفيل ألم يجعل كيدهم في تضليل وأرسل عليهم طيرا أبابيل ترميهم بحجارة من سجيل فجعلهم كعصف معقول. صدق الله العظيم. Alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, as we agreed last week, that we try and just quickly make our way through the last 10 surahs of the Quran, and by looking at these we understand what it is that we're reciting in our salah. We try and do that. So if we choose to recite one of these, then we're fully aware of what message Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is trying to give us, and this helps us in many ways, so that when we're reciting we can concentrate on what we're trying to understand. So the last 10 surahs we understood that they have a link. We understood that they have a link that they go through. So obviously on the sheets we have the layout of the surah, so if you follow as we go through, it makes it easier for us to remember and understand what's going on. So as we agreed last week, we start with Surah Fil. We went through the background, and last week we went through the whole story of how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He explains to the people of Makkah the incident which happened at the time of the birth of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this happened just a few days before the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was born, and that also gives it a lot of reverence and importance to an extent, that how this event, it signifies the birth of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the prophethood of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So as we went through the story, we'll try and get into the surah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He starts off with Alam tara kayfa fa'ala rabbuka bi ashabil fil, which translates as that, did you not see how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He dealt with the people of the elephant? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He starts off with Alam tara. Alam tara in English will translate as did you not see, and this is something which has a lot of significance in many ways. So even in English, when we want to emphasize something, we'll very often say that did you not see, and by saying that, it increases the emphasis of that thing, that did you not see such a big event that happened. So here again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to get everybody's attention, He says Alam tara, did you not see this big event? And obviously if He's addressing the people of Quraysh, the point which is emphasized here by using Alam tara, the point is not that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, He's not just saying the story, He's not just telling us a story, He's trying to get us to understand for ourselves how this story benefits all of us. So this is the main point that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gets across, that by using Alam tara, Allah wants to firstly evoke our attention and get the emotion going. This is one very important point which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala emphasizes on. And for example, in other parts of the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says that Alam yaraw kam ahlakna min qablihim, that did you not see how many people we destroyed? So again, the punishment here came on the people of the elephant. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He then asking the people of Makkah that did you not see how we destroyed the people of the elephant? So in the same way, if you carry on opposing Allah, if you carry on ascribing partners to Allah, then in the same way this punishment will come to you. In fact, this verse is actually very relevant. The way that the sentence is formulated, it's used in the present tense. Alam yaraw. Yara is the present form of a verb, although it's translated as past tense. So we'll say didn't you see in the past tense, but the actual verb which is used is the present tense. And this gives the meaning that the actual fact that all of us until today, this verse applies to all of us. There's many tyrants we'll see today that they will go around the world, and even today they will bomb certain places, or they'll attack and invade certain places without any fear of any kind of repercussion, and they'll do this. So just like Abraha and his army, they went to destroy Makkah and nobody was going to say anything to them. So it's the same thing which happens nowadays today. So this is why this question of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that do you not see how we dealt with them? We can deal with everybody in the same way. This question still applies today. So the verse remains relevant even till today. Now, what is the sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? How does Allah deal with these kind of people? This is the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala deals with the oppressors when they come and oppress other people. This is the sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Another thing we notice that when Allah says Alam Tara, did you not see, it's not actually literal, because obviously the main person who's being addressed here is the Prophet ﷺ. He's the main person. Alam Tara, did you not see? But it doesn't mean it literally, because as we know, the Prophet ﷺ was born after the attack of the elephants. So therefore, the Prophet ﷺ definitely did not see it. So that's impossible for him to have seen. So the phrase, did you not see, even in English, it's not always something which is literal. If you may be explaining something on the phone, and somebody may say, oh, I see, I understand. It can mean to understand. Do you not understand how Allah dealt with them? This is what it really means. It's a figurative way of saying it. And it's the same in English. It's very easy for us to understand. Also, this same point, it indicates on how famous the event was. That the Prophet ﷺ wasn't alive, but is still fully aware of the incident. In fact, we know that when the historians describe the birth of the Prophet ﷺ, many of them say that the birth took place 50 days after the incident of Fil. So the incident of Fil became like the calendar almost at that time. So it was such a massive event, it was such an extraordinary event, that people would now use this as a calendar, that 1 year after Amul Fil, or 1 year before Amul Fil, or 2 years afterwards, or 5 years afterwards, or this many days and weeks afterwards, that's how famous an event it became. And mutawatiran, continuously it was passed down, the story was passed down, which is why when Allah says, Alam Tara, did you not see, it applies to everybody, because everybody knows what the story is. Everybody already has heard the story, and they know the general lessons which was taken in that story. And the main point is that it's not meant to be a story, it's meant to be something which everybody takes a lesson from. Alam Tara, this is just this first couple of words. Alam Tara, do you not see, do you not take a lesson, do you not understand, and do you not benefit, most importantly, from what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made occur here. So every one of these, this incident should be compared with yourselves. Abraha and the people in power came and they attacked the people who weren't in power, but Allah decided to help the people who weren't in power. And this incident, this applies for the people of Makkah at that time as well. As we know, Islam was in, this surah is a Meccan surah, so the people of Makkah, the Quraysh, were in power, and the Muslims were very weak at that time. So now the people in power were oppressing the Muslims who weren't in power. So again, this applies very relevantly to that situation as well, and also addressing the Prophet ﷺ. So the Prophet ﷺ, he has a message as well. His message is that even though you are slightly weak, even though you may not have the tanks to stop the elephants from attacking, you may not have the power to stop the Meccans from torturing you, but the same way Makkah at that time didn't have anyone to protect it, Allah sent His own army to protect you. So this is the thing that we learn from Alam Tara. Moving on, if you look at the next on the left, the next word Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses, Alam Tara Kaif. Kaif, Kaifiyya, the method is usually translated as how. Now this is something which means that now whatever's going to come, whatever description Allah now uses, is now going to have some detail. It's going to definitely have some detail behind it. And this is always the case. Whenever we ask how do we do something, there'll always be detail behind it. So this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decides, that within the surah there will be a lot of the detail mentioned, and this detail will help emphasize the original point. The original point is that we take benefit, we realize what happened, and the better we can picture and understand ourselves what happened, the more we ourselves will be able to understand and benefit from how this incident is also relevant to us in our lives today. So this is one of the key things we learn. And this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explains in very great detail, as we know, as it comes, we will understand in great detail what happens. So that's something which is very, very beneficial for us. And then kayfa fa'ala. Fa'ala, in this case we translate it as dealt with. How did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala deal with the people of the elephant? And this is something which is used here. And obviously fa'ala generally means to do something, but it's to do something abstract. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He does something physically with these people. So these people are going to come, and there's different words for doing things. We have amala and also, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He specifically uses the word fa'ala because He's going to do something physically with these people and destroy them in a specific way. So now the description comes. And then after this, Alam tara kayfa fa'ala rabbuka. And this is one of the most important verses, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He describes who is going to deal with the people of Fil. So He says rabbuka. Again, most mufassirin agree is addressing the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the mukhatab, the person being addressed, is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. However, also we know that the real people who are also being told are the Makkans, the Quraysh, the people worshipping the idols in the house. They are also being addressed. So we have two audiences. And then even from the language, we see that it applies to us today as well. So it applies to everyone, but it's directly addressing the Prophet ﷺ. Allah refers to himself as a Rabb. Now, if we go back to the story, when Abdul Muttalib came to negotiate, he negotiated for his camels because he was the owner of the camels. And he said that the house has its own Rabb. The house is its owner of its own. And because Allah is the owner of the house, Allah protected the house. Now Allah defines himself or describes himself as the Rabb of the Prophet ﷺ, Rabbuka, and the guy is addressing the Prophet ﷺ. So just like now Islam is weak and Islam is being oppressed, and the people or the Muslims are being tortured, but now the Prophet ﷺ, he's now being described as similarly to the way the house was described before. So the house was protected by Allah. The Prophet ﷺ, you will also be protected by the Rabb. And then we done in Surah Fatiha how a Rabb is the being who will protect and in different ways and nurture and bring up in many different ways. So the benefits which behind Rabb come are very many. Also, Rabb, as we know, has an opposite. We done this in Surah Fatiha as well. So Rabb has the opposite, which is slave. So a Rabb is a master, and the Rabb has to have the opposite, which is a slave. So now, if Allah is your Rabb, then if he's addressing the Makkans, then you need to start acting as the slaves of Allah. You have to make sure that you act as the slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So accept him as your Rabb. He's the Rabb of the house. He protected the house. So now the point was the Makkans used to use the protection of Allah to legitimize their idols and to legitimize almost the sanctity of the house. The house is sacred because, remember Amul Fil? When Allah protected the house, so we are the owners of the house. We are the people that look after the house. So this means that we are right and everybody else is wrong. This is something they used to use. But now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds them that now when you have the message, if you have a Lord, you do what He tells you to. You do what your master tells you to. And you act in the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands you through the messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So this is something very important which they're told to keep in mind here. Just by the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He uses the word Rabb. And if you notice that throughout the surah, this specific surah, Surah Fil, the Kaaba itself is not mentioned. However, the Prophet ﷺ is mentioned. So in the story, Abdul Muttalib, he mentions the Kaaba, but actually in Surah Fil we don't find the Kaaba mentioned at all. The house isn't mentioned. However, we do find here, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says Rabbuka, so we find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He does actually mention the Prophet ﷺ, not the Kaaba. So protecting the Prophet is mentioned, but protecting the Kaaba specifically is not mentioned. This does come in the next surah. In the Ilafi Quraysh we find the Kaaba mentioned. So we'll mention that. And remember, we mentioned at the beginning that there's going to be a link between all of the surahs. So we'll mention this link, how they all link together as well, inshallah. And that will obviously come when we start going into detail of the next surah, inshallah. So this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explains, and these are all just a few of the points we get from Rabb and how we understand the benefits, and they're very briefly written there. And the reality is that this is addressing the Prophet, that the way that at the moment the Makkans are in charge and the Muslims are weak, Allah can turn the tables very quickly. This is the key message from Rabb. And also it kind of indicates on how ugly the Makkans have made the Kaaba. They've put the idols there, they're doing shirk in there. And there's one Rabb, there's one Allah. He's the one who deserves to be worshipped. And by them putting all these things, they're claiming sanctity of the Kaaba, but then they're putting ugly things inside. It's almost like they're ruining the Kaaba. So this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Again, Rabbuka is just, there's only one Lord which you have, and that's who you should be worshipping. Then the next word, Alam tara kayfa fa'ala rabbuk bi ashabil fil. Ashabil fil is very nicely translated. Ashabul fil as in the elephant people. This is the best way to translate it. The elephant people. Now, whenever we have sahib, so the simplest example is the Prophet ﷺ. So the Prophet ﷺ is generally known as the main person. And then if somebody is a sahaba or a sahib, as we know, then or sahabi. So he's a companion of the Prophet ﷺ. So Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, for example, he's mentioned even in the Quran as sahib of the Prophet ﷺ. So now the main will be mentioned, and then the people who belong to the main thing will be referred to as sahib. So now here the main thing which is mentioned is the elephant, and it's almost as if the whole army of Abraha and Abraha himself, they belong to the elephant. This is one way to understand it. Another way to understand it is that Abraha, they're defined as elephant people because the way they act is very animalistic and like elephants. So these are two ways of understanding. Why does Allah describe them as elephant people? Number one, because elephant people, because the elephants are the real thing, and these are the people of the elephants. They're just following. And the evidence for this is that when the elephants were told to march forward towards the Kaaba, they actually showed more intellect than the humans. So the elephant Mahmud, as we know, he refused to carry on. He stopped, and they had to beat him to carry on. If you turned him around, he'd go back towards Yemen, but he wouldn't carry on towards the Kaaba. Now, showing more intellect than a human shows that he's really in charge. He's the one with the brain here. The rest of them, they become tabi of the elephant. They become lower than the elephant to that extent. So that was the first one, that because they're worse than the elephants, that's why we don't treat them like the owners of the elephant. And the second one, because they have animal-like character within them of wanting to destroy the Kaaba, that's why they're described as the elephant people. So this is the reason they're described, and that's all in bi ashabil fil, that's all explained there. And that's the end of the first verse. And move on to the second verse. Alam yaj'al kaydahum fi tadlil. Now generally, very holistically to translate that, Alam yaj'al kaydahum fi tadlil, did he not ruin their plans? That's the easiest way to translate it. But if you look at word to word, Alam, again we got at the beginning, Alam tara. Now Alam yaj'al. So again, Alam gives the meaning of didn't he. So Alam yaj'al, didn't he place? Yaj'al means to place or make or transform. Didn't he transform kaydahum, their plan, into fi tadlil, into destruction? So now the way the language comes is they had a very nice plan actually. The plan was almost perfect. There wasn't really a problem with the plan, to the extent that they actually executed the plan right to the very end, until just before they got to the Kaaba. So the plan wasn't something which was so flawed. So that's why Allah describes, the plan was all going fine, everything's going fine. So they're coming up, obviously the story starts when they build their own church, and then after building it, the plan doesn't work. So then they make this big plan to go and destroy the Kaaba. And this plan, from getting the army together and going to destroy the Kaaba, it's all going okay until the elephant stops. So now Allah then, by making the elephant stop and by sending the birds, He then destroys a plan which was going to work. So this is why the plan was a sensible plan, but it was destroyed because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose to destroy it. So that's how it was transformed from something which was about to work into something which was completely tadlil, a word which is used for utter destruction. And again, it's also, the present is again used, alam yaj'al. So this is the present tense, although we translate it as the past, didn't he ruin their plan? But again, the actual form of the verb is in the present form. And this again gives the meaning that this will continue happening. If somebody comes and plans to destroy another nation, and they're oppressing the nation, and the nation can't do anything, then Allah will help the oppressed nation in some way or another. This is something which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promises, and this is something which will continue happening. That's why the present is used. To the extent that some scholars give an example, that if you were to take a dog, and if you wanted to punish a dog or any animal, and it's an animal which likes to be free, so then if you were to tie it up with a short leash of 1 meter, you take a 1 meter short piece of rope, you tie it up and leave it there, then it's not going to be able to escape, and it's not going to be able to even move around. It's going to know it's chained up. However, if you were to do the opposite and make a very, very long rope of a whole kilometer long rope, and then this dog was to then run all the way, keep running, and the dog thinks it's free. So he runs for the whole kilometer, and then suddenly at full speed he gets yanked back. So this is the difference. So now Abraha, he makes this whole plan. The plan doesn't get ruined at the beginning. The plan all goes fine. Everything goes fine. The army is made, the elephants are walking. Then even at Taif is very close to Makkah. Taif is when they found Abu Rigal. So if Allah wanted, Abu Rigal would not have come, and they wouldn't have found their way. They found a new sat-nav system basically at Taif, and He promised to take them all the way to Makkah. So even everything going to plan, but then Allah destroys the plan at the last minute. It's almost like the dog. So one is to destroy the plan at the beginning and have no army, have no elephants, and the other is to let the plan go all the way to the end of the kilometer, and then at the last minute the plan gets destroyed. And this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala done that. And these are the words which are used. If you can turn over on the next page, Kaydahum generally refers to a secret plan. Now this is very strange, because obviously the plan of Abraha was very open. He declared to everyone, I'm going to destroy the Kaaba. He made his own Kaaba, and I'm destroying this one. So what was secret, and is mentioned here, is that, as we mentioned last time, is that Yemen used to be the economic capital, and all trade used to go through there. He wanted to regain the economy, and he wanted to revive the economy of Yemen. However, he pretended to have religious motives. He pretended that he was, bothered about, the religion, and he made Christianity his base. That's why Habasha, that's why the Ethiopians helped him. because they were Christians, and he made he made reasons which were based in Christianity, and that's why they helped him. But that wasn't his actual reason. His real reason was he wanted Yemen to become rich and prosperous and politically influential as well. Again, that's why Allah describes as kaydahum, and this is one reason the scholars have given, that kayd is used, even though kayd is usually a secret plan and makr is the open plan, but kayd is used because he had a secret, which was that he was actually lying about the religious part. That was the secret part. And fi tadlil, he makes it into loss. So the word fi is used, and this indicates that, as I've already mentioned, we've already covered this, that it was a good plan, but Allah made it into loss. He made it into a destructive plan. And tadlil is to use for repetition. I mean, dalala is like, in Surah Fatiha, walad dalin, dalala, people that are astray. Dalala would be the note. Tadlil is a different scale of the word. It's the same word, to be deviant, but tadlil, to be lost and be deviant and repeatedly be deviant. So now, if you look at the story, Abraha's plan was lost in many, many different ways. So first, his plan was to build the church. When he built the church, nobody came there. Then he built the church, told everyone to come there, and then somebody came and tried to burn it down, or in some narrations somebody tried to, the Arabs came and defecated there. So now this disgraces him even more. Then he comes and makes a whole army and all of these things, and tries to get the army together and tries to destroy the Kaaba. And then the elephants stop going. Then the elephants stop. Another part of his plan. So many times his plan gets destroyed. Then he tries to destroy the Kaaba. The elephants stops moving. Then they try and go forward. The birds come and destroy the whole army. And as a result of their plan, now the sanctity of the Kaaba is increased so much. The Kaaba is so much more revered. When this story becomes famous, everybody's like, Allah protected the house. Whereas before, the sanctity may not have been as much. So his plan completely backfired. So that's a failure in many, many ways. That's why tadlil, this is one reason why tadlil gives the meaning that many, many times they failed in their plan. There's one objection which comes, is that these people, they came to destroy the Kaaba. However, destroying the Kaaba is not as bad as somebody doing shirk and ascribing partners to Allah. So how come Allah didn't destroy the people doing the shirk, but He destroyed the people who came to destroy the Kaaba? This is one question. Scholars answer it different ways. But one of the key things which is very important, and generally even within ourselves it benefits us, is that what is our job is the rights of each other and the rights of Allah. So there's two types of rights. One are the rights of Allah and one are the rights of each other. So for example, every one of you has a right to be protected from my harm, for example. So now the Makkans, they were the ones who were looking after the Kaaba. If that was destroyed, it would harm them. It was a right of a human. So now Allah's general sunnah is to interfere when the rights of people are being violated. This is the general sunnah of Allah. If the right of Allah is violated, generally we don't see interference from Allah. This is the general one. This is how the question is answered. So there's two kind of violations. By attacking the Kaaba and destroying all the people there, that's a violation of the people of the Kaaba. So that's their right being violated. That's why Allah will protect them. However, the house of Allah and worshipping idols, this is a right of Allah. But generally in the world, that's not something which Allah avenges or when it's violated. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay, that's the end of second verse. وَأَرْسَلَ عَلَيْهِمْ طَيْرًا أَبَابِيلَ. Very simple verse. And now the details start. So we said kayf. So the kayfiyya is now going to be explained. So أَرْسَلَ عَلَيْهِمْ, sent upon them, طَيْرًا, birds, أَبَابِيل. أَبَابِيل is basically many, many birds. So it's very simple, and the different scholars give different explanations. Some say جَمَعَاتْ فِي تَفَرُّقَ, that many types of birds. And there's basically two opinions of what is ababil. So we have tayr, which is very common for birds, and ababil is another word which is a bit more confusing. Not everyone knows what that means. Ababil, so one explanation is it's many types of birds, and the other explanation is jama'atu azim. This is what Allama Nuhas says, who's a grammarian. So he says it's many birds. So it's ababil, it indicates on the quantity of the birds, and the first one, what it indicates on the variety of the birds. This is the two different understandings that we get from ababil. And obviously this is one of the armies which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah has many, وَمَا يَعْلَمُ جُنُودَ رَبِّكَ إِلَّا هُ, only Allah knows His armies. And this is one of the many armies which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used. And we know in different places He used different types of armies. And then تَرْمِيهِمْ بِحِجَارَةٍ مِّن سِجِّيلٍ. Tarmihim, again, this is present tense. Here by using present tense, again, it gives a meaning of repetition, that continuously they were thrown upon. ترميهم بحجارة من سجيل. So حجارة من سجيل. So as we know, the birds came upon them, and then the birds are doing the rami. They are doing the throwing. The rami has a specific meaning of the when something is thrown and it's thrown from a distance. This is something which Rami has extra. So it's not normal throwing, but thrown from a distance. This is one thing which Rami gives the meaning of. And also a pelting which is aimed at a specific target. So all of the army of Abraha almost was specifically targeted by the individual stones. So it was thrown obviously from a distance of the sky, and it was thrown at a specific target of the army of Abraha. This is the key things that we learn. Tarmihim bihijara min sijil. Hijara is a very common word, again, just like tayr, it means stone. Sijil is something which has different explanations. One of the simplest ways is that it was something which is made out of either clay, so stones made out of clay, or stones which kind of fall out of rocks. So that you have a big mountain or a big rock, and stones which, the smaller stones which come out of there, that's called a sijil. Or more famously, it's actually made out of dust. It's made out of nothing almost. So the dust particles, when they gather together, that's what makes sijil. So different things what sijil is. But one of the key descriptions of sijil is a stone that when it hits a target, it penetrates all the way through. So rather than hitting somebody's head and bouncing off, it will penetrate and go all the way through. Now remember, Allah's answering the question. So Allah's question was, كَيْفَ فَعَلَ رَبُّكَ? How did your Lord? So now it's quite graphic language, it's quite explicit detail, because Allah promised that He's going to explain how. So now we have graphic language here. فَجَعَلَهُمْ كَأَصْفٍ مَأْكُولٍ. And this is the end, and this is now, the reason is because now, remember the Prophet ﷺ wasn't alive. Many of the people may not have been alive. A lot of the Makkans, the elders, will have seen this all happen, but many of them may have not seen this. So now for them to understand, Allah gives a nice visual example here. كَأَصْفٍ مَأْكُولٍ فَجَعَلَهُمْ. Again, Allah transformed them. Again, same translation as before, as ja'ala came before. He transformed them. So now we had a full army, full normal human beings. So from being a full army, He made them into something else. كَأَصْفٍ مَأْكُولٍ. Ka is used as if. So now Allah's, He's telling us that He's going to describe the scene now. So ka is used to describe something. When I want to describe something as something else, so He made them as if they were asfin ma'kul. Asfin ma'kul is such a thing which is usually blown away by the wind. So straw or leaves or something like this. Generally most the scholars translate it as straw. So they were like straw and hay, it's eaten by horses and cows and cattle. So when it's eaten, ma'kul means something which is eaten, or something which is supposed to be eaten. So ma'kul, so now we can take two meanings, we'll come to that in a minute. But for example, if a cow was eating a piece of hay or straw and it falls out, that would be ma'kul. It's been eaten and it's fallen out. The way that looks, this is how Allah is describing the leftovers of Abraha's army. Another meaning of ma'kul is something which is supposed to be eaten. So they were so helpless and so they couldn't do anything, just like something which is meant to be eaten. For example, hay or straw, or for humans, our normal food. Once it's prepared and meant to be eaten, if it's an animal, it can run away. But once it's ready for eating, now it can't do anything. It's completely helpless. So that's how Allah describes the army of Abraha at that time. So this is an overall of the surah. Obviously last week we done the brief kind of background and the background of the story and the detail of the story. So today going through the translation, and obviously hopefully if you keep the handouts and try and briefly go through it, obviously the video is on YouTube as well, by going through it, and then this way we try and learn and go through, because obviously we could just spend the whole time focusing on the Arabic and going through it, but obviously we don't have that much time. So it's dependent on all of us, especially those of us that don't know Arabic fluently, that we try and keep reading through and keep understanding. And we recite Surah Al Fil, and we recite this surah inside our salat, so that way we become familiar with the translation. So I make that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the ability to benefit from all of the lessons which are given in. So